Teaching a dog to walk with no tension on a lead first requires you to have built up value for the dog being by your side. The first place we start with this is teaching what we call a side sit. We need to get the dog to feel comfortable and see value in being still by our side, as this will make it easier to get them to feel a similar way when we're moving. Most dogs know how to sit. However, this is very dependent on context. So when they first learn to sit, generally it's in front of us. And therefore, when we say sit, the associated action of that is sit in front of me. So they cannot transfer their learning easily between contexts like we can, which means asking for a side sit is a totally new concept to a dog. So we have to start from the very beginning again and lure them into the correct position. To teach a side sit, we start with the dog sitting in front of us. Now, Zach here has never learnt a side sit before, so we can't expect that he automatically knows what we want from him. Zach will be walked on the left side in future, so he'll be taught the side sit on the left side. However, if you'd prefer to walk your dog on the right, then instead you would teach the side sit on your right hand side. So Sarah starts with Zach sitting in front of her, and then takes some food in her hand and lures Zach in a circle out and away from her body to get him to turn around and come into her side. You'll see she moves her left leg backwards out the way, which allows her to lure Zach in a bigger circle so that he can turn around easier and she can still remain balanced. It also prevents Zach from bumping into her leg when he turns around. Eventually, Zach will learn how to maneuver his back legs around, and Sarah won't need the leg movement any longer. When Zach is in the right position, Sarah will say yes and hand over a treat. You'll notice that she'll say yes and reward Zach multiple times while he's sitting on that side position. She does this to keep him seated there. If she only ever did one yes and reward on the side, Zach would likely get up and move after that one treat, as he'd know there's no more coming. So the trick is to be very random in the number of times you say yes and reward your dog each time they're sitting on the side. This way they don't know when the treats are going to stop. Zach is fairly confident and happy going into this position straight away. However, your dog may not be. So if you can't get them to sit straight away, that's okay. Just get them happy and comfortable moving into the side position and reward them in a stand. And once they're comfortable there, you can add in a sit at the end. Now that we've practiced our side sits a lot and Zach sees a lot of value for being on the side, we can move on to the next step in our loose lead training, which we call I stop, you stop. That means we're going to begin the process of teaching Zach that when we stop walking, he also needs to stop walking and ideally be in that side sit position. Before we begin, it's important to first consider why a dog will pull on the lead. One reason is to get to something or potentially away from something, but another reason is because of, would you believe it, physics. I'll explain that one further. So when a dog pulls on the lead, the most common human response is to pull back on the lead because it's annoying for us and they may be quite strong and almost pulling us over. However, when we pull the dog backwards, we pull them off balance. So in order to regain that balance, they have to apply that same pressure on the lead forwards. And then that again puts us off balance and the cycle continues. We must also recognize that dogs weren't born knowing how to walk on a lead. So we can't expect that of them unless we've actually put in the time to teach them the behavior we like and reinforce it heavily to make it worth their while. Before we even begin teaching the dog to stop when we stop, we first begin with a side sit. So this is what we call a starting behavior, and that's for us to assess whether the dog's focus is on us and they're ready to learn. If we can't get the dog's focus with a basic exercise that they know, there's no point moving forward, as you will get frustrated, the dog will get frustrated, and it ends up being counterproductive for both of you. So if you can't get your dog's focus with that side sit, you either need to move to an environment with much less distractions, or have a think about how much practice you've put into those side sits and whether your dog might need some more.
One way to teach your dog to pay attention to your movements and stop when you stop is through luring. But first, Sarah needs to make sure that Zach is ready to learn. So to do this, she gets him into his side sit and marks and rewards him a few times. She's happy that he's ready to go, so she puts a lure in her hand and takes it in front of Zach's nose and lures him forward 1 or 2 steps, then lifts her hand slightly up above his head, and this encourages him back into his side sit. You can see that each time she stops, she says yes and rewards Zach multiple times, just to build extra value for him remaining next to her. You should practice this in short sessions where you'll do no more than 12 repetitions. Over time, you can start to add in extra steps instead of just doing 1 or 2. And as your dog gets the idea, you'll also need to start fading out the lure.
One of the most common concerns we get with luring is that a dog will only do the behavior if you have food in your hand. This response from a dog happens when you don't fade out the lure. Remember, a lure is a way of creating a behavior, but once they can reliably do that behavior, we need to fade out the lure and introduce a verbal cue for that given behavior. Please also note that this doesn't mean we stop rewarding the dog. It just means we don't have to have the lure present in our hand in order for them to do the behavior we're after.
To fade out your lure, you start by repositioning the treat further up your hand. This makes it slightly more hidden and out of reach for your dog. You would spend at least a couple of short 5 to 10 minute sessions with the treat at each of these positions and move it up your hand further when your dog can still reliably do the behavior you're after. The next step is to introduce what we call a fake lure. That's where we dip our hand into the pouch and pretend to take a treat, then guide the dog through the movement just as we had done before. Once they do the movement, you then say yes and take a treat from the pouch and reward the dog. Introduce your fake lure gradually. Start with a random 1 in 5 repetitions having the fake lure, then 2 in 5, then 3, and so on until you no longer need the food in your hand for the dog to do the movement. If your dog loses confidence or starts disengaging, go back to intermittently having the treat in your hand.